हेलो फ्रेंड्स, वेलकम टू द स्टडी ऑफ इंग्लिश। आज हम पढ़ेंगे बायोग्राफिया लिटरेरिया बाय सैमुअल टेलर कोलरिज। बायोग्राफिया लिटरेरिया एस.टी. कोलरिज के एक ऑटोबायोग्राफिकल वर्क हैं जिसे पब्लिश्ड किया था 1817 में। इसके सबटाइटल या दूसरा नाम है बायोग्राफिकल स्केचेस ऑफ माई लिटरेरी लाइफ एंड ओपिनियंस। इस वर्क में कोलरिज ने वर्ड्सवर्थ के थियरी ऑफ पोएट्री को क्रिटिसाइज किया। इस वर्क को लिखने में कोलरिज को इन्फ्लुएंस मिला था जर्मन फिलोसोफर्स कैंट, फिक्ट और शेलिंग से। इस वर्क के मेन डिस्कशंस हैं फैंसी एंड इमेजिनेशन, प्राइमरी एंड सेकेंडरी इमेजिनेशन, विलिंग सस्पेंशन ऑफ डिसबिलीफ एंड Coleridge view of poetry and the poet. Now, let's see what is fancy and imagination according to Coleridge. Coleridge defined fancy as a lower form of imagination that is merely associative. It doesn't involve any deeper understanding or insight. For example, a designer uses fancy to make a new design of a dress or a car. These are new model, new design, but we know that dress and car exists from an earlier time. जो चीज़ ऑलरेडी बनाया गया है, अगर उसे नया तरीके से बनाया जाता है या फिर कोई नया आकार दिया जाता है तो इसे फैंसी कहते हैं। On the other hand, imagination, according to Coleridge, is the faculty associated with creativity and the power to shape and unify. It's an active and creative process that invents new ideas or images. For example, a poet or artist uses imagination to write a poem or do an artistic work. Imagination, fancy के तरह नहीं है, imagination उसे create करता है, जो अब तक बना ही नहीं। Coleridge defined imagination into two types, primary and secondary. Primary imagination is common to all human beings. It enables us to perceive and make sense of the world. People use primary imagination in their everyday life. But secondary imagination is more active and conscious. It dissolves, diffuses, dissipates in order to recreate. Secondary imagination makes artistic creation possible. For example, poets, artists, philosophers use secondary imagination to write poetry or an artistic work. प्राइमरी इमेजिनेशन तो हम सभी के पास है, पर सेकेंडरी इमेजिनेशन सभी के पास नहीं होता। इसे खास तौर पर पोएट, साइंटिस्ट या फिर अदर आर्टिस्ट्स लोग पोएट्री लिखने या फिर कोई आर्टिस्टिक और साइंटिफिक वर्क करने के लिए इस्तेमाल करते हैं। नाउ लेट्स सी व्हाट इज विलिंग सस्पेंशन ऑफ डिसबिलीफ। Coleridge used the phrase willing suspension of disbelief to justify the use of fantastic or non-realistic elements in literary work. Coleridge suggested that if a writer used fantastic or non-realistic elements in poetry or novel, the reader should accept or believe that fantasy during the time of reading to enjoy the work. For example, if we read a novel where there are many unrealistic elements, we have to believe its existence for a while to enjoy the story. If we watch a movie such as The Avengers, we can enjoy the movie. If we don't think that it is not real, it's just a magic of computer. That means, to enjoy a fantastic or non-realistic work, we have to suspend our disbelief. Coleridge's definition of poetry and the poet arises from his views on imagination. Poetry is an activity of the poet's mind and imagination. It's a kind of activity in which any creative artist, poets, painters or scientists work. It brings out the whole soul of man into activity through the magical power of imagination. Coleridge identifies imagination with the soul of poetry. It is a living power. He doesn't regard literary device as absolutely essential for poetry. He clearly says that poetry of highest kind may exist without meter. Coleridge thinks that no man was ever a great poet without being a profound philosophy. A great poet should attempt and achieve a union between the high finish and the appropriateness. Coleridge didn't praise Wordsworth's theory of poetry that the characters of poetry should be chosen from low and rustic life. Coleridge says that a rustic man has very limited knowledge. Wordsworth का मानना है कि पोएट्री लिखने के लिए जो कैरेक्टर की आवश्यकता होती है, उसे लो और रस्टक यानी विलेज लाइफ से लेना चाहिए। पर कोलरिज ये बिल्कुल नहीं मानते, उसे लगता है कि लो और रस्टक लाइफ के कैरेक्टर के पास ज़्यादा नॉलेज नहीं होता।